So again, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So, if we were to look at secular American holidays, we would note that there are three elements, if you will, ritual elements that make up our holidays as Americans, and that, depending on how important the holiday is, will determine how many of those elements are present. What are those three elements? The first is you get a day off of work. The second is the department stores have a sale. And the third is there is food traditionally associated with the holiday. So according to this scale, our two most important holidays are July 4th and Thanksgiving. And they have all three elements. One notch down, you find your President's Day, right? Because they have the day off, and they have the sales, but there's no food. And then you get to the lowest rung of the national holidays, the ones that are sort of there, but we kind of even forget a little what they're all about. And those are the ones that we get just a day off on. That would be like Columbus Day. Yeah, I know, but I'm thinking of Columbus Day, if that's okay by you. I'm sorry? Yes, Columbus Day is Thanksgiving in Canada. Anything else? It's okay by you if I continue? I can go on? Good. Okay. Now listen, fine by me. He's just a president in training for a congregation, that's all. Anyway, so Columbus Day would be an example of one among many, of a day that doesn't rate so much because all we do is get a day off. And not only that, but not everyone even takes the day off. Sure, your banks, your bond markets, your federal agencies, some, note, only some school districts, but otherwise, most of the places are open. I mean, Columbus Day barely ranks. It barely rates as a holiday. This, by the way, would be exactly how Hanukkah is perceived in the rabbinic world. Because in rabbinic Judaism, actually in Judaism in general, if you're really a big holiday, there's one thing that distinguishes you from all the other holidays. It's a day where you cease from work. That's the big holiday. If you're not doing that, then you're barely on the radar of Jewish holidays. And Hanukkah does not even merit a day off. We celebrate it with the lighting of a little Chanukiah and a ritual that lasts, well, all of 15 seconds. Now, imagine work with me here, imagine though that Columbus Day, which already doesn't really merit much attention from us, imagine if we were to discover that everything that we had learned about Columbus Day was wrong, and that Columbus had not in fact arrived in the Americas on October 12th, 1492, but he had in fact landed in Greenland, and that everything we know historically was incorrect about the holiday. Imagine how we would then think about the holiday the next year it came around. Here's a holiday that's barely observed, and now we find that the historical basis of it is completely false. It would be hard to justify a day off, even with those few institutions that actually take or give the day off. It would, in a sense, fall into disuse. Something on the calendar, but something that people don't really pay attention to. And that, my friend, is exactly how the Jews in the land of Israel felt in 71 of the Common Era. Why? Because the Hanukkah holiday, commemorates our rededication of the temple that stood in Jerusalem. And in the year 70 of the Common Era, what happened to that temple that had been rededicated? It was destroyed. Not just destroyed, actually, though that is, in fact, what I was thinking. But it was absolutely wiped out, leveled. They plowed over the whole Holy of Holies. It was completely destroyed. So you can imagine, in year 71 of the Common Era, that the Jews in the land of Israel would not really be too enthusiastic about the holiday of Hanukkah. Because how do you celebrate the rededication of that which has been utterly wiped out right before your very eyes? And in fact, for 200 years, that is exactly what happened. For about 200 years, the Jews in the land of Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel, did not really observe Hanukkah. It went from being Columbus Day, already pretty low on the totem pole, to basically being ignored day, observed by very, very few Jews in the land. And then something happened. Then in the year of 270, a woman by the name of Zenobia became the queen of what was called then Palmyra, which is in Syria today, which was also the same location of the Greek Assyrians who set off all the trouble that created the need for Hanukkah in the first place. This is where Antiochus came from. And once again, from the same location, a power rises up in the form of this queen, and she tackles the Roman Empire, and she conquers the eastern part of the Roman Empire, taking over Arabia, Egypt, and what was then referred to as Roman Palestine, the land of Israel. And so once again, we had these Assyrians in our country. And once again, they were limiting our freedom of worship and how the Jews at that time wanted to practice their Judaism. And in the face of that threat and that oppression, Rabbi Yochanan came around and he said, and we will now start lighting the Hanukkot. We will start lighting those Hanukkah candles. And we will light them and continue to light them until, as he says, the feet of the Tamodorai, which is their word for Palmarians, until the feet of the Palmarians are no longer in our marketplaces. In other words, until they have been expelled, just as we had done over 300 years before with those other people who came from that part of the world, he said. And so we see here an interesting shift in the nature of Hanukkah. We look at it as a holiday of commemoration to celebrate what they did. But Rabbi Yochanan is coming along and saying, no, 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 no. Wrong way to look at it. This is a holiday about aspiration, not commemoration. This is a holiday where we aspire to throw off the yoke again of a foreign power so that we can live as we wish to live. And over the course of 3 years, and with the help of other powers who sought this queen's downfall, they would once again throw out the foreign rulers who were impinging and infringing upon their way of worship. It's essential, though, that we not lose sight of what Rabbi Yochanan did. When he insisted that we start celebrating this holiday again, he revived it in the land of Israel. From an ignored and almost forgotten holiday, he raised it up to say, no, this holiday reminds us that we can aspire to a better world for ourselves if we but listen to the call of God and respond. We can aspire to make this a better place. We can aspire to bring tikkun, healing, wholeness to our fractured world. That is what Hanukkah meant for him. And I would suggest that if we wish to understand why it is that this lowly holiday occupies such an important place in the life of American Jewry at this time, I would suggest it's not just because those cynical comments, oh, we're competing with Christmas. On the contrary, I would like to suggest that we have understood always that Hanukkah is a holiday about what can be, not what was. And that's why we light those candles from 1 to 8, not from 8 to 1. Because what can be is so much greater than what is. And so Hanukkah calls to us to aspire to something better. But aspiration, in order to be fulfilled, requires perspiration. It requires work. And if our work is to be significant, we have to know truly how How do we make this world a better place? It's all well and good to stay up and say here that we should, but let's talk talkless. Let's talk details. What can we learn from our tradition as to what it is we can do in our lives to make our world a more holy and sacred space? I would suggest that this Torah portion that we read offers up one of the single most important things and ways that we can engage in our world to make it better. We read in the Torah portion about the rise of Joseph. And on the surface, we might think it is his rise to power and wealth that might be our way to making our world better, for surely it is with his power and his wealth that he does just that. He anticipates the famine, he prepares, and he can feed the world, not just Egypt, but the whole world. And there is that within us that is lured by thinking that it is power and wealth that will help us make this world a better place. Just think of how excited we were when Senator Joseph Lieberman was a vice presidential candidate, a Jew in such high position. I got to tell you, that's nothing. His position as vice president is a pittance compared to Joseph's power. For Joseph still ranks as the single most powerful Jew ever in the history of our people, second to none to the most powerful man in the world at the time who had given over to him everything. And yet the rabbis are not so impressed by his power. And they say, it's not his power that's going to make the difference in this world, but something else. And in chapter 42, verses 7 and 8, we read about how Joseph's brothers come before him. But it's now been over 2 decades since they've seen their brother. He no longer looks the same. He is dressed differently. He speaks Egyptian. So they do not recognize him. But the Torah says, but Joseph recognized them. He saw his brothers and he recognized them. And the rabbis say, why the repetition? He saw them and he recognized them. Of course he saw them and recognized them. So they say, this is how the verse is to be understood. Joseph saw his brothers and he recognized them as his brothers. A small little flip in the text, but huge in significance. Because Joseph could have looked at his brothers and said, oh yeah, this is going to be good. Here they are. Here they are, those, I can't use the word in shul. Those people who threw me into the pit, who sold me into slavery, who led me to this life of degradation. There they are, powerless before me. They hated me. They sold me into slavery. It's party time. He could have said that, but he didn't. He didn't let his justifiable anger and hate cloud him from this one essential fact, that for all they have done, they are his brothers. And that trumps all else. In a commentary, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, the chief rabbi of England, notes that Western culture tends to look at the world and understand the source of conflict as being intergenerational between parents and children. Hence, Freud focuses on Oedipus and his wonderful relationship with his mother and his father. But the Torah has a different sense. The Torah understands that the source of conflict in this world is not intergenerational, but intragenerational. It occurs between siblings, between Cain and Abel, between Isaac and Ishmael, between Jacob and Esau, between Joseph and his brothers. In fact, the arc of the narrative of Genesis is how these sibling conflicts work out over time until finally we get to 2 brothers, Manasseh and Ephraim, Joseph's sons, who do not seek to either sell, steal, kill, rob, or abuse each other. Which is why, by the way, we traditionally bless our children, our boys, with the blessings, may you be like Manasseh and Ephraim on Friday night. This source of conflict between siblings goes back to the very first question that Cain asked when God said, "Where is your brother?" He said, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And all of Judaism is here to tell you this very simple answer. Yes, you are your brother's keeper. And guess who's your brother? Everybody. We are all descendants from Adam. We are all descendants from that one human being. We are all family. We are all to treat each other as a sense of obligation and respect to one another, whoever they are, so that our emotions, our pain, our feelings do not dominate or cloud our vision of our responsibilities, to treat everyone with respect and with understanding and with compassion and with love. For that, in the ideal, is what siblings are meant to do. And that's what Joseph teaches us. And that, I would like to suggest, is worthy of us to aspire to. Within Judaism, there is no such thing as the stranger. For we understand that we are related to all human beings. Let us aspire to live our lives in that way. And if we can but do that, then our lives and our world, like the Chanukiah and its candles, will only grow brighter and brighter. May it be so. May we make it happen. And we all say, Amen. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.